She knew that she was going to show this very famous picture that is shown regularly in art history classes of what Muslims consider to be the Prophet Muhammad. And this is verboten for some Muslims. Other Muslims disagree that this is verboten and think it's fine. But of course, we've had all sorts of history, even in our own country, never mind in France with Charlie Hebdo, where people have been killed for drawing Muhammad. So it gets crazy when you go down this route. Now, we live in a country where you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to show it. You're allowed to talk about it. You're allowed to draw it. It's called the First Amendment. We're allowed to. Could offend people. Okay. We generally bank on the fact no one's going to get killed and certainly not fired for showing something that some may find objectionable, but that is regularly shown in classes at the university level. This woman herself says she was shown this picture when she was a graduate student. So what did she do? Did she just pop it up there at random, where some people could be offended? You could make the case that that's okay too, but she didn't. In the syllabus, she warned images of holy figures, including the Prophet Muhammad and the Buddha, would be shown. She asked students to contact her with any concerns if they had them. No one did. In the class, she prepared the students, telling them in a few minutes the painting would be displayed in case anyone wanted to leave. According to Daily Mail, it was a 2-minute warning, plenty of time for a grown-up to stand up and walk out the door. She told the New York Times she spent a few minutes explaining why she was going to show the image, how different religions have depicted the divine, and how standards do change over time. I do not want to present the art of Islam as something that is monolithic, she said. And by the way, in the wake of this controversy, various Muslim groups have proven it's not monolithic. They've come out to say we all view this very differently. What did the university do? Okay, at first, nothing. But then a senior in the class who was presumably subjected to all of those warnings decided this was a problem. Her name is Aram Wedatala, a business major, president of the university's Muslim Student Association. You'd think she'd be paying attention to the trigger warnings in the syllabus, in the classroom, etc. Here she is. She claims she was blindsided, I tell you, by this image. After the class ended, she stuck around to voice her discomfort. And here's what she said on a public forum website, quote, "I'm like, this can't be real. As a Muslim and a Black person, I don't feel like I belong. And I don't think I'll ever belong in a community where they don't value me as a member and they don't show the same respect that I show them." And then she gets a bunch of other students not in the class to join her in saying this was an attack on their religion, yada, yada, yada. The professor's fired. I mean, you could have seen it coming. They say this is about a university starved for tuitions in a heavily Muslim area saying, let me bend the knee so nobody pulls their kid or their tuition, even though not all Muslims feel the same about this, again, right? But they've just bent the knee, despite the clear First Amendment implications of that disastrous decision. What do you guys think of it?
Beyond the First Amendment, I mean, I'm going to leave the First Amendment out of this, as a private college here. There's a million problems with this, and one doesn't even almost know where to begin. I mean, first of all, you said, Megyn, this student was given all the warnings, and apparently she didn't pay attention or was asleep at the wheel. I disagree. I think she heard all of them, and I think she set this up very deliberately.
Yep.
I mean, her response is exactly what made me think this when she says, I'm like, this can't be real. It can't be real that in an art history class where you've been told you're going to see a 14th century image that includes Muhammad, that you saw one. It can't be real. And then says, as a Muslim, a Black person, I don't know what this has to do with race. What does this have to do with being Black? So you can tell she's going through the playbook already as a Muslim and as a Black person. A Black person, who is a Christian would not have any response to a picture of Muhammad. I don't feel like I belong. You're the president of the Muslim Association, and the entire administration acceded to your completely lunatic demand. One person. Right. So when all these news stories say Muslim students, plural, there was one in the class. There was one who objected because, it's very easy to make hay out of all this stuff. The one thing I will say that is incredibly positive, there is a very, very positive thing that has come out of this. It is not for the professor who is an adjunct, essentially has no, they didn't renew her contract, basically. They for all intents and purposes, fired her. The response has been great. beyond what the university did, which was disgusting and shameful. The president, some other people, one person, by the way, who said that it was undeniably Islamophobic. What happened was somebody at the university, and get a load of this person, Dr. David Everett. Who is Dr. David Everett? According to the New York Times, he is the Associate Vice President of Inclusive Excellence. What? I mean, this is the type of nonsense bullshit that we're dealing with here. The associate vice president. Now imagine in that chain, there's presidents, viceroys of inclusive excellence said that this is Islamophobic. But as you pointed out, the world does not agree, including people in the Muslim world. A number of Muslims have come forward and say, this is actually ridiculous. The idea is a kind of white left-wing academic idea that there's a full-on prohibition of depictions of Muhammad. That's not true. It's not in the Quran. There's some hadiths that say things about this, but not explicitly. And in certain parts of the Muslim world, particularly in Iran, you see a lot of this stuff. And there was an Iranian professor at Duke who said, I left during the Iran-Iraq War, and I brought an image of Muhammad with me, and it's framed in my office. He actually spoke about this. And also the New York Times did a very good piece about it that was clearly saying, this is kind of crazy. So you have a number of people that are pushing back on this stuff. When I think about 2 or 3 years ago, no one would have said anything. And I think the pushback here is actually pretty heartening.
Michael, I have to disagree with you, though, about the Islamophobia. I think this was an example of Islamophobia, as have a lot of these similar examples have been, which is to say it is fear that Muslims are going to blow you up.
Sure.
That is preventing people from or giving them a cowardice of dealing with this. And you're right that the New York Times piece was pretty good. What was missing from that New York Times piece?
Well, it was one click in, but
it was one click in.
There was one. They did actually show the image. I did see it somewhere else where the face, I swear to God, the face of Muhammad was pixelated as if it was. I found it online. It was on Twitter.
So
you had to click one in, but they
had to click one in. But also in the print edition, because this was in the Sunday paper, they had 5 pictures. The online story has 6 pictures, all of different people. But the New York Times itself won't show unadulterated in its pages any image depictions of Muhammad. They had an article, this is right around the time of the Charlie Hebdo massacre in 2015. They had an article about the history of a statue that stood for a half a century on a courthouse in Lower Manhattan. That statue was of Muhammad because we have statuary and representations of Muhammad. It's actually a sign of respect. There's one up in the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court to this day. New York Times policies that they would not show a statue of that. They had an article about this statue and its history and about how about 50 years ago, it was taken down and sent to a warehouse in New Jersey or something. And it was taken down out of exaggerated sense of like, well, we don't want to offend anybody. Okay, what's an interesting story about local history? They didn't show even a historical archive photo of the statue. A couple of months later, they ran a piece, obviously, in the art section about a depiction, I think it was Pope Benedict, him being displayed by condoms, right? It was a condom art of the Pope. They could display that without any problems at all. And the reader's representative was invited to explain the apparent discrepancy. You won't show an existing statue that was not intended to offend, that lived historically in New York City, in an article about that, but you will show the Pope made it of the condoms, as Father Guido Sarducci famously said. And they said, well, the communities take great offense, and so we have to be subject to, respectful of their desires. This is the heckler's veto. The New York Times has, even though this is a very good article and everyone should go read it, the New York Times has contributed to the atmosphere that we have in this country, which is that in professional media, with the exception of a few explicitly ideological places, there is a taboo against showing depictions of Muhammad, even though Muhammad was a really existing human being. He's not like a person that was invented and did Noah really have an ark kind of situation. No, it's Muhammad. He lived. And there were actual depictions in an art history context and others. And we are exercising a taboo that the New York Times, which is the leading newspaper in this country still for some reason, has been an integral part of. And until we break that taboo, I'm afraid that Charlie Hebdo, which has an amazing cover this week, I look forward to Megyn showing that one later on. Charlie Hebdo is going to have a huge target, continue to have a huge target on its back, because it's one of the only publications in the broader Western world that has balls anymore.
I have never been able to compost before. It was always too complicated and too much work. Not anymore, thanks to Lomi. Lomi allows me to turn my food scraps into dirt with the push of a button. This is a countertop electric composter that turns scraps to dirt in under 4 hours. There's no smell when it runs, and it's super quiet. Thanks to Lomi, I have way less garbage each week, too. Instead, I turn this waste into nutrient-rich dirt that I can feed to my plants. Now, I'm composting and creating soil with my kids' help instead of creating waste. I have a basically limitless supply of dirt for my garden, and if you would like to join me in this endeavor and start making a positive environmental impact, or just make cleanup after dinner that much easier, Lomi is perfect for you. Go to lomi.com/MK and use the promo code MK to get $50 off your Lomi. That's $50 off when you head to lomi.com/MK. Use that promo code MK at checkout. Food waste is gross. Let Lomi save you a cold trip out to the garbage can. Lomi.com. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.